Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was born as the hybrid of Shinigami and Hollow. The true Bleach King Naruto X tier Harribel X Neliel to Bleach. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Emergence. There was no beginning. Time, as a concept, was a river that flowed around the stone of its existence. The stone did not experience the current, it simply was. Before light, before shadow, before the frantic scuttling of souls and the desperate hunger that drove them, there was a stillness. A perfect, silent equilibrium. This equilibrium possessed a consciousness. But it was not a mind in any recognizable sense. It was an awareness of its own placid totality, a state of being that needed no name, for there was nothing else to differentiate it from. It was all, and all was quiescent. Then, a vibration. It was not a sound. Sound required a medium, and this place was the utter absence of media. It was a tremor in the very fabric of its isness. A disso. Nant chord played upon the strings of reality, so faint at first that it was less than a memory. But it did not fade. It grew, a persistent, grating hum that suggested a profound flaw in the cosmic architecture. The equilibrium, for the first time in an existence that predated eons, was disturbed. The awareness focused. The act of focusing was itself a novelty, a gathering of self from an omnipres end state into a singular point of inquiry. It extended a sense that was not touch, nor sight, nor hearing, yet held the properties of all three. It perceived the dissonance not as a thing, but as a quality. It tasted of bitter ash and rusted iron. It felt like jagged, broken glass grinding against silk. It smelled of ozone and decay. The flaw, it perceived, was a schism. Reality had been fractured. What was once a unified whole had been shattered into three distinct, warring concepts. It perceived them as vast, leaking vessels of spiritual energy. One vessel was defined by stagnation. A world of fleeting, cycling life and death, where souls were born and died in blissful, tragic ignorance. Their energy was vibrant but chaotic, a flickering sea of untapped potential that flared and died like fireflies in an endless night. This was the world of the living. The second vessel was defined by order. A realm of stark, rigid structure, where the flow of souls was managed, policed, and forced into a cycle of purification that was both a preservative and a prison. Its energy was immense but constrained, channeled through pathways of tradition and law that had become brittle with age. This was soul society. The third was defined by hunger. A bleak, empty desert of inverse existence, where souls devolved into instinct, driven by an insatiable need to consume, to fill a void that could never be filled. Its energy was raw, powerful, and utterly chaotic, a self-devouring engine of despair. This was Hueco Mundo. The consciousness recoiled from the sheer wrongness of it all. This fractured, imbalanced system was a sickness, a corruption of the original, singular state. The constant, grinding friction between these three realms was the source of the dissonance that had disturbed its slumber. And within that dissonance, one particular shriek of pain echoed with greater clarity than the rest. It was recent, sharp, and profound. It spoke of absolute loyalty met with casual betrayal. It was the sound of a noble sacrifice rendered utterly meaningless. It was the agony of a queen, a guardian, struck down not by an honorable foe, in a battle for a cause, but by the very king she had sworn to serve. For a reason as flimsy as a shift in his capricious grand design. This specific injustice resonated through the void, a focal point of the universal imbalance. It was a wound upon the spirit of existence itself. The awareness, the great equilibrium, made a decision. An act of will, sharp and sudden as the striking of a match in an infinite darkness. It would no longer simply be. It would act. For the first time, it gathered itself to create a form. Not out of vanity or necessity, but as a tool, a lens through which to focus its will upon the fractured planes. Energy, both positive and negative, the very stuff of creation and annihilation, swirled from the nothingness. It wove itself into threads of impossible density, spinning a vessel of refined, perfect balance. White, the sea, allure of bone bleached by a sun that had not yet been born, formed a silken houri that seemed to drink the non-light of the void. Black, the color of the space between stars, coalesced into a kosoden. Hakama that felt older than darkness itself. Hair the color of moonlight spilled down, framing a face of serene, sculpted neutrality. And then, it opened its eyes. They were not eyes that saw. They were apertures into the void itself. Twin pools of utter blackness from which all light fled. Yet, at their very center, a single point of impossibly bright, silver light burned in each, the spark of the original will. The focus of the primordial consciousness. The vessel was complete. It stood in the timeless, placid non-space, a perfect synthesis of all that was and all that wasn't. And as it took its first breath, a pointless, symbolic act, it gave itself a name. A sound that encapsulated its purpose. Naruto. With the name came purpose, and with purpose, direction. The echo of betrayal was his beacon. He did not travel, for travel implied distance and time. He simply ceased to be in the void and, in the same infinitesimal moment, began to be elsewhere. The air tasted of dust, iron, and burnt spiritual energy. The shattered remnants of artificial city blocks lay strewn across a landscape of cracked earth under a sky the color of a fading bruise. This was a scar, a battlefield where immense powers had clashed and bled. Naruto stood amidst the rubble, his presence so utterly alien that it went unnoticed at first. His bare feet rested on the broken ground, yet not a speck of dust clung to them. The chaotic energies left over from the war swirled around him, parting like water around a stone, unable to touch him. A short distance away, the final act of this particular drama was playing out. Men and women in black robes. Their energies a mixture of exhaustion, grim satisfaction, and lingering fear, surrounded a single figure. Sosuke Aizen. He was bound, his own monstrously power. Full and distorted energy being crushed and sealed by a complex, glowing construct of orange light. The architect of the seal, a blond man in a ridiculous hat and clogs, watched with a weary but sharp intellect. The commander of the black-robed army, an ancient man whose spiritual pressure felt like a dying sun, observed with grim finality. They were all fools. Naruto perceived their entire conflict in a single, detached moment of clarity. Aizen's rebellion was not a true play for godhood, it was a child smashing a toy castle because he was bored of its rules. The Shinigami's defense was not a noble protection of order. It was a desperate, fearful preservation of a stagnant, rotting system. They were two sides of the same flawed coin, perpetuating the very imbalance that was a cancer on existence. Their war was a symptom, not the disease. He cared for it no more than a physician would care for a single cough from a plague-ridden patient. His attention, his entire being, was focused elsewhere. He turned his head, and the simple motion seemed to cause the world to tilt on its axis. The captains and lieutenants of the Gote 13, who had been focused on Aizen's ceiling, suddenly felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was a primal, instinctual dread, the feeling of a mouse realizing the shadow passing over it is not from a cloud, but from a hawk. They turned, and they saw him. He wasn't releasing any spiritual pressure. That was the most terrifying part. A being could suppress their ryutsu, mask it, but there was always a sense of presence, a weight. With this newcomer, there was nothing. A perfect, absolute void. It was like looking at a hole cut in the very fabric of the world. His appearance was stark. The bone-white hair, the impossible black and white robes, and the eyes. Dear gods, the eyes. To look into them was to feel one's very soul begin to unravel. What is that? A silver-haired captain whispered, his hand instinctively going to his sword. The old captain commander, Genryusai Yamamoto, narrowed his eyes. His millennia of experience screamed at him that this was something beyond any classification he had ever known. Not Shinigami, not Hollow, not Quincy, not human. It was other. Even Kazuki Urahara, the man of 1,000 plans, found his mind drawing a complete and utter blank. Every instinct he had for analysis, for categorization, for understanding, failed him. The being before them was an existential anomaly, a variable he could not even begin to calculate. As the final chains of the seal wrapped around Sosuke Aizen, the fallen god's eyes, full of impotent fury and undying arrogance, flickered and widened. He saw Naruto. For a single, breathless moment, the two beings locked gazes across the ruined battlefield. Aizen, the mastermind who had manipulated souls and centuries, felt a sensation he had not experienced since he was a child, the feeling of being utterly and completely insignificant. The being's eyes held no malice, no judgment, no anger. They held only a vast, cosmic indifference, the same way a mountain might regard a single, frantic ant crawling upon its surface. In that gaze, Aizen saw his entire rebellion, his ambition. His very existence, weighed, measured, and dismissed as a minor triviality. The seal flared, and Aizen was gone. Naruto broke the gaze, turning away as if from a mildly interesting pebble. His attention already elsewhere. He had not come for this posturing child. He had come for the echo. Without a word, without a sound, he took a step. And the world dissolved. 1 meter. Moment he was in the ruins of the fake Karakura town, the next he was under the sterile, artificial moon of a white desert. Las Noches. A monument to a hollow king's ambition, now silent and empty save for the whisper of the wind across its sterile white structures. Atop the highest spire, under the cold, unblinking gaze of the eternal night, lay the victims of the betrayal that had summoned him. Harribel, the Tercera Espada, was cleaved from shoulder to hip, her life's blood, a dark spiritual fluid, staining the pristine white stone. Her mask fragment was cracked, her amber eyes staring, unseeing, at the false sky. Her power, once a raging sea, was now a rapidly evaporating puddle. She was not merely dead, her very existence was dissolving back into the undifferentiated spirit matter of Hueco Mundo. Around her lay her 3 Fracken, Emilo Apache, Francesca Mila Rose, Cyan Sung Sun. They too were broken, cut down with casual, contemptuous ease. Yet even as their forms flickered and faded, they had crawled to be near their queen, their loyalty a burning, defiant ember in the face of oblivion. This was the source of the echo. This was the meaningless sacrifice. A queen and her loyal knights. Discarded like a broken sword. Naruto appeared beside them, his silent arrival sending a fine tremor through the stone. He knelt, the motion fluid and deliberate. He was not pitying them. Pity was a human emotion, born from a sense of shared frailty. He felt no frailty. He was examining the damage, the flaw in their creation. They were a rancor, an imperfect fusion of Shinigami and Hollow. A crude attempt at balance. Forced and unnatural. Aizen had not created true hybrids, he had simply plastered a thin veneer of order over a core of chaotic hunger. It was an unstable, inefficient design. He reached out a hand. His long, pale fingers hovering over Harribel's grievous wound. He would not heal her. Healing implied repairing a damaged original. He intended to create something new. He closed his eyes, and the world fell silent. From his fingertips, threads of energy, some as bright as starlight, others as dark as the void in his eyes, emerged. They plunged into Harribel and her Fracken. There was no gentle mending. Instead, there was a systematic, fundamental deconstruction. He pulled their fading essences apart, unraveling the very threads of their spiritual being. He separated the core of their hollow nature, the hunger, the instinct, the raw power, from the fragile Shinigami-like structure Aizen had imposed upon them. He held their souls, 4 flickering, terrified motes of light and shadow, in the palm of his hand. He saw their history, their loyalty, their pain. He saw Harribel's core concept, sacrifice. The desire to be a predator to protect the weak who could not pray for themselves. He saw the fierce, animalistic devotion of her Fracken. These were noble concepts, worthy of preservation. The flaw was not in their will, but in their form. So, he began to weave. He took the threads of their hollow nature and purified them, burning away the mindless hunger, leaving only the primal strength. He took the fragments of their Shinigami power and reinforced them, imbuing them with a stability they had never known. Then, he wove them back together, not as a patchwork of opposing forces, but as a true, perfect synthesis. A braid of light and shadow, order and chaos, intertwined so completely that they became a single, new substance. He didn't just close their wounds, he erased the very concept of their ever having been wounded. He removed the flaw in their design. The air grew heavy, thick with a power that was neither Hollow nor Shinigami. It was something else entirely. A soft, turquoise light emanated from the 4 bodies, pulsing in time with a slow, powerful heartbeat. Harribel's eyes shot open. The first thing she felt was not pain, but completeness. The gnawing void that was the core of every Hollow, a feeling she had carried for centuries, was gone. In its place was a placid, deep well of power. Her body was whole, more than whole. It felt stronger, more real, more hers than it ever had before. She sat up, her movements fluid and effortless. The great wound was gone, leaving not even a scar. Her gaze fell upon her Fracken, who were also stirring, looking at their own restored bodies with wide, disbelieving eyes. Then, she saw him. He was kneeling before her, his hand still outstretched, the last vestiges of the turquoise light fading from his fingertips. His face was calm, impassive, those void-like eyes observing her with an unnerving placidity. She instinctively fell into a defensive stance, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Her ryutsu flared, a dense, heavy pressure that could make lesser beings suffocate. The being before her didn't even flinch. Her power washed over him and vanished, like a wave breaking against an infinite cliff face. A voice echoed in her mind, not through her ears. It was calm, resonant, and carried the weight of absolute truth. Your existence was flawed. I have corrected it. Harribel stared, her sharp mind racing. This was no Shinigami. This was no Hollow. He was something else. His power was not a measurable quantity. It was a fundamental aspect of the environment, like gravity or the passage of time. It was beyond Aizen, beyond Yamamoto, beyond anything she could have conceived. He rose to his feet in a single, graceful motion, turning to look out over the vast, empty desert of Hueco Mundo. His white houri billowed slightly in a wind that wasn't there. This world is a monument to hunger. The voice continued, laced with a profound sense of disapproval. An engine that consumes itself to survive, growing only weaker with every cycle. It is an imbalance, a failure. He turned his head slightly, his gaze falling upon her. Your loyalty was given to one who saw you as a tool. Your sacrifice was meaningless. It echoed through the void and disturbed my slumber. Harribel felt a tremor of something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. It wasn't fear, it was awe. He spoke of her deepest truths as if they were simple, observable facts. He gestured to the empty air beside him, and the space began to warp. It did not tear open into the harsh blackness of a garganta. Instead, reality itself seemed to gently unfold, peeling back layer by layer to reveal a doorway. Beyond the threshold was not darkness, but a calm, neutral gray, a place of quiet potential that seemed to hum with a latent, creative energy. I am building a place of balance, he stated, his voice unwavering. A foundation for what should be. In that realm, you will not need to struggle to survive. You will simply be. Your strength will be a pillar, not a weapon of last resort. Your loyalty will be valued, not discarded. He looked directly at her, and for the first time, she felt the full, focused weight of his will. It was not a demand or a command. It was an offer, a law of physics being presented for her consideration. Come with me, cheer Harribel, and have a true purpose. Or remain in this echo of a world and fade into the meaninglessness you so narrowly escaped. The choice was laid bare. Remain in the world she knew, a world of betrayal, endless conflict, and despair, or step into the unknown with a being of incomprehensible power who spoke of purpose and balance. She looked at her restored Fracken, who were looking to her, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and newfound hope. She looked at the desolate wasteland of Hueco Mundo, a kingdom that had brought her nothing but pain. And she looked at him. In his eyes, she saw not the fiery ambition of a conqueror like Barragan, nor the deceptive charisma of a manipulator like Aizen. She saw a vast, calm certainty. The certainty of a creator standing before a block of marble, knowing precisely the sculpture that slept within. Her decision was instantaneous. Cheer Harribel, the former Tercera Espada, knelt. She placed a fist over her heart, a gesture of fealty she had once given to another king. This time, it felt right. Apache. Mila rose. Sung Sun, her 3 Fracken, without hesitation, knelt beside her. Harribel looked up at the primordial being, her amber eyes burning with a fierce, renewed conviction. We will follow you. The being, Naruto, gave a single, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. He turned and stepped through the unfolding doorway, his form swallowed by the gentle gray beyond. He did not look back. He did not need to. Cheer Harribel rose, sharing a long, silent look with her loyal knights. Then, with the resolute step of a queen leaving a dead kingdom for a promised land, she led them into the unknown. The doorway folded shut behind them, leaving the spire of Las Noches empty once more. As if they had never been there at all. The only evidence of the cosmic transaction was the sudden, utter silence where an echo of profound betrayal had once been. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The First Pillar. The transition was not a physical sensation. It was not like the violent, tearing passage of a garganta, which always felt like being ripped through the raw, screaming guts of reality. Nor was it the sterile, instantaneous shift of a Shinigami's Senkaimon. One moment, Harribel stood upon the cold, dead stone of Las Noches, the next, she stood within the gray. It was a world without features, a place of infinite, uniform potential. The air, if it could be called that, was still and held no temperature. There was no ground, yet they stood upon a solid, featureless plain that extended into a misty, directionless horizon. There was no sky, only a soft, sourceless luminescence that was the very essence of the color gray. It was not empty. Emptiness was a quality, a lack of things. This was not a lack. This was a place before things. It was the canvas upon which a universe could be painted. Her Fracken stood beside her, their usual boisterous energy completely suppressed by the sheer, profound strangeness of their new environment. Mila Rosa's fiery defiance, Apache's feral aggression, Sung Sun's aloof sarcasm, all were swallowed by the immense, placid silence. They huddled close, their eyes wide, watching the being who had brought them here. Naruto stood a few paces ahead, his stark black and white form the only point of contrast in the monochromatic landscape. He was not looking at them. He was observing the realm, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to a song only he could hear. To Harribel, a being whose entire existence had been defined by sharp edges, the edge of a sword, the edge of survival, the edge of a barren horizon, this place of infinite softness was deeply unsettling. This is the nexus, his voice stated, echoing not in the air but directly within their consciousness. It was a statement of fact, like declaring the nature of stone or water. It is a foundation, a space between the fractured worlds, connected to all but belonging to none. It is potential. He raised a hand, palm upward. The gesture was unhurried, imbued with a sense of geologic patience. Harribel watched, her senses on high alert, trying to perceive the mechanics of his power. She could feel no surge of Raryoku, no gathering of spiritual particles from the environment. His power did not seem to draw from anything. It simply was. From the center of his palm, a single mote of light appeared. It was a brilliant, turquoise speck, the same color as the energy he had used to reforge them. The mote drifted upward, ascending into the gray expanse. For a moment, it was just a tiny, lonely star in a formless sky. Then, it pulsed. A wave of energy, silent and gentle, expanded from the mote in a perfect sphere. As the wave washed over the featureless gray, it left change in its wake. The uniform luminescence above them began to differentiate, swirling into vast, slow-moving nebulae of soft lavender and deep indigo. Stars, not the harsh, distant diamonds of Hueco Mundo's night, but soft, shimmering motes of silver and gold, ignited within the celestial tapestry. It was not a false sky painted on a dome. It was a cosmos, born in a single, silent exhalation of will. The featureless plain beneath their feet rippled. The gray gave way to a fine, white sand that glittered as if mixed with crushed pearls. It was cool and soft to the touch. The transformation flowed outward from where they stood. The desert of white sand expanding for miles in every direction, its surface rising and falling in gentle, sweeping dunes that seemed sculpted by a patient, loving wind. Naruto lowered his hand. A beginning requires a canvas. Harribel looked up at the newborn sky, then down at the pristine sand. Her mind struggled to process the scale of what she had just witnessed. Aizen had built Las Noches, a monumental feat of spiritual construction. But he had built it from the existing reishi of Hueco Mundo. This was different. This was not construction. It was genesis. He had not shaped what was. He had commanded what wasn't to become. What are you? The question escaped her lips before she could suppress it, her voice rough and quiet in the nascent air. He turned to face her. Those black hole eyes with their silver-light pupils seemed to look through her, analyzing the very concepts that comprised her being. I am the balance they have forgotten. The whole from which the fragments were broken. To you, I am a sanctuary. To them, he gestured vaguely, indicating the other worlds beyond the Nexus. I will be a reckoning. His words held no ego, no boastful pride. He spoke of his own nature with the same detached finality he had used to describe the realm. Apache, ever the most impulsive, took a half-step forward, a snarl touching her lips. You think you can just snap your fingers and make a world? Aizen promised much, and delivered only betrayal. Naruto's gaze shifted to her. He did not reprimand her. He did not threaten. He simply observed. Sosuke Aizen was an anomaly. A gifted but short-sighted artisan who sought to improve a flawed design using the same flawed tools that created it. He sought to replace the Soul King. A meaningless ambition. The Soul King is nothing but a linchpin, a mutilated battery holding the fractured realms apart. It is the ultimate symbol of the imbalance. He turned his gaze back to the vast expanse of his new creation. I do not seek to rule their broken house. I will build a new one, and their foundations will crumble into dust from its mere existence. He began to walk, his bare feet leaving no prints in the sand. Instinctively, Harribel and her Fracken followed. As they walked, the world continued to bloom around them. From the white sands, crystalline structures began to grow. They were not jagged or sharp, but rose in smooth, elegant spires and arches, glowing with a soft, internal light. They resembled enormous, petrified trees made of quartz and moonstone. As they grew, a low, resonant hum filled the air. A soothing vibration that seemed to calm the lingering agitation in their souls. Life requires water, Naruto stated. He paused and touched the ground at the base of one of the crystalline spires. The sand darkened at his touch, and from that point, a pool of water began to well up. It was perfectly clear, and as the pool expanded into a vast, serene lake, the water did not displace the sand but seemed to merge with it, creating a floor of shimmering white beneath the crystalline depths. The water itself radiated a gentle, calming energy. It was pure, uncorrupted spiritual power in liquid form. Sung Sun, the most analytical of the Fracken, knelt by the edge, dipping her fingers into the lake. Her eyes widened slightly. This energy, it's pure. It's not like the reishi in Hawako Mundo, which is always tinged with hunger. This is sustenance, Naruto finished for her. Here, you will not need to consume other souls to maintain your existence. The very air, the water, the light from this sky, it will nourish you. Hunger is a symptom of the imbalance. It has no place in the Nexus. Mila Rose stared at him, her usual cynicism warring with the undeniable truth of what she was experiencing. For the first time since she had become a hollow, the faint, ever-present gnawing in the pit of her being was silent. To live without hunting, without fighting for every scrap of power. That's impossible. It is impossible in a system predicated on consumption, Naruto corrected gently. Here, power is not a resource to be hoarded. It is a state of being to be achieved. You will grow stronger not by devouring others, but by refining yourselves in harmony with the realm. He gestured toward the center of the vast lake. From the depths, a new structure began to rise. This was no simple crystal tree. It was a citadel, a fortress palace of breathtaking scale and elegance. It was carved from a single, seamless piece of obsidian-like material that seemed to absorb the soft light of the nebulae above, its surface swirling with faint, silver patterns. Towers rose like elegant claws, connected by graceful, arched bridges. Water from the lake cascaded down its sides in shimmering, silent waterfalls, flowing through channels carved into the dark stone before returning to the lake in a perfect, self-sustaining cycle. There were no walls, no gates, no fortifications. It was a structure built not for defense, but for habitation. It was a palace that radiated an aura of unassailable peace. A home, Naruto said, his voice holding, for the first time, a high NT of something other than detached pronouncement. It was not warmth, precisely, but a sense of fulfillment. A place from which your purpose can be directed. They stood on the shore of the lake, Santa ring at the impossible citadel that had risen from nothing in a matter of moments. Harribel found her own thoughts in turmoil. She had followed Aizen out of a desire for a world without sacrifice. He had promised to overturn a stagnant system, and she, disillusioned with the brutal, meaningless cycle of Hawako Mundo, had believed him. She had seen his power, his intellect, and mistaken it for wisdom. This being, Naruto, was entirely different. He did not speak of rebellion or conquest. He spoke of correction, of balance. He did not seek to rule, he sought to create. Where Aizen's ambition had been a raging, destructive fire, Naruto's will was like a glacier, slow, inexorable, and world-shaping. Aizen had demanded loyalty. Naruto simply offered a better state of existence, and trusted that logic and reason would lead to the same conclusion. Her loyalty to Aizen had been a calculated gamble. Her burgeoning loyalty to Naruto felt like aligning herself with a fundamental law of nature. One could not be loyal to gravity. One simply accepted its truth. Why us? She asked, her voice low. You could have chosen anyone. Any number of powerful souls from any of the worlds. Why 4 broken Arankar? Naruto turned his full attention to her once more. Because you were the most immediate, poignant symptom of the sickness. Your sacrifice was a dissonant chord that needed to be resolved. And, because your core nature, that of a guardian who becomes a predator to protect her own, is a concept worthy of preservation. You understand what it means to build a sanctuary, even if you have only ever known how to do it with violence. Here, you will learn to build it with peace. He looked at her fracken. Their loyalty to you is an echo of the proper order of things. A hierarchy based not on fear or domination, but on earned respect and a shared desire for preservation. That, too, is worthy. A bridge of the same silvery black stone flowed from the citadel's main entrance, extending across the water to stop at their feet. It was a silent invitation. Harribel was the first to step onto it. The stone was smooth and cool beneath her feet. As she walked toward her new home, she felt the weight of centuries of struggle begin to lift from her shoulders. It was a foreign, unsettling sensation, and she instinctively braced herself for the other shoe to drop, for the betrayal that was sure to come. But as she looked at Naruto's calm, impassive back, she found that the expectation of betrayal had no purchase. His very being radiated a kind of absolute integrity. He was what he was. He cool. No more be deceptive than a star could decide not to be hot. The interior of the citadel was as vast and serene as its exterior. Great, open halls with impossibly high ceilings were supported by pillars of glowing crystal. The silver patterns on the walls swirled gently, like captured galaxies. The air was filled with the same low, resonant hum, and the soft light of the cosmos outside filtered through high, arched windows. There was no furniture, no decorations. It was a perfect, empty vessel. This place will shape itself according to the needs and desires of its inhabitants, Naruto explained, gesturing to the empty hall. It is a reflection of those who dwell within it. It will become your home in truth, not just in form. As if to prove his point, Sung's son, who had always valued her privacy, glanced at a large, empty alcove. In her mind, she pictured a quiet, secluded space for meditation. The moment the thought formed, the stone of the alcove flowed and reshaped itself, creating a comfortable, enclosed room with a low divan and soft, indirect lighting. She gasped, stumbling back. Naruto simply nodded. The nexus is responsive. The implications were staggering. This was not just a home. It was a symbiotic environment, a realm that catered to its residents' very thoughts. For the next several hours, which passed in a timeless, dreamlike state, they explored. Apache, thinking of a training ground, found a vast chamber that configured itself with obstacles and targets of hardened spiritual energy. Mila Rose, desiring a place to vent her frustrations, discovered a balcony overlooking a vast, empty expanse of the desert where she could unleash her sorrow without fear of collateral damage. Harribel herself sought a high vantage point, a place from which to observe, and found herself in a circular chamber at the top of the highest spire, with panoramic windows that offered a view of the entire, breathtaking landscape. It was more than any of them had ever dared to dream of. A home, a sanctuary, a place of peace and plenty, where their existence was not a constant, grueling war. And yet, as she stood in her new throne room, a simple, elegant chamber with a single, unadorned seat of black stone, a seed of unease remained in Harribel. She had been a queen without a kingdom, and now she had a palace beyond imagining. But a sanctuary was only a sanctuary if it was safe. Naruto entered the chamber, his footsteps making no sound. He stood before her, his expression as unreadable as ever. "You are not at ease," he stated. "This place is a paradise," she replied, her voice level. "But the worlds outside are not. Soul Society fears what it cannot control. The scavengers of Hueco Mundo will be drawn to a source of such power. You have shown me creation. But can this paradise be defended? It does not need to be, he said simply. The Nexus does not exist within their dimensional plane. It is connected to it, but separate. They cannot force their way in. They could only enter if invited. He paused, his void-like eyes seeming to gaze at something far beyond the walls of the chamber. However, the imbalance I came to correct is not limited to your own fate. There are other echoes, other souls trapped in the broken cycles of the three worlds. Harribel watched him, sensing a shift in his purpose. The creation phase was over. Now, something else was beginning. Naruto closed his eyes, and the silver light at their center seemed to burn brighter, visible even through his eyelids. I am extending my senses, seeking other, broken fragments, other injustices that require correction. The air in the room grew heavy. Harribel could feel the tendrils of his consciousness spreading out from the Nexus, passing through the membrane of reality. She felt THM brush against the world of the living, a place she had only seen in distorted, temporary forms. She felt them sweep through the rigid, ordered grid of the Seraite. And then, she felt them plunge deep into the searing, empty wastes of Hueco Mundo. His senses, impossibly vast and subtle, scanned the desert. They passed over colonies of lesser hollows, ignored the brooding, wounded remnants of Aizen's army, and dismissed the brutish warlords trying to carve out new territories. He was looking for a specific frequency of despair, a particular signature of a flawed existence. And then, he found it. A flicker of amusement, a sensation so alien on his impassive features that it was startling, touched his lips. How curious. A being of immense potential, shattered and reduced to a caricature. A guardian forced into the role of a child's game, her power caged not by an external force, but by a wound to her own spirit. She is a profound contradiction. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto Harribel's. There is another, a former queen, much like yourself. Her name is Neliel tu Odelschwank. The name was a ghost from a past Harribel had all but forgotten. The Espada who had vanished long before her own time. A cautionary tale, a rumor of betrayal and lost power. I know the name, Harribel said, her voice tight. She and her companions suffer needlessly under the desert sun, their true forms suppressed. Naruto continued. Her existence is another flaw. Another dissonant note. It must be corrected. He turned to leave the throne room. I will retrieve her. You will be the first pillar of this court, Cheer Harribel. Your role is to govern this realm in my name. See to the integration of your Fracken. Establish the first laws of this sanctuary, that no soul shall hunger, no soul shall be sacrificed for the ambition of another. He paused at the doorway, looking back at her. Prepare yourself. Our family is about to grow. He vanished, not in a flash of speed or a distortion of space. He was simply there one moment, and gone the next. Harribel was left alone in the silent, grand throne room, the weight of his words settling upon her. A family, a court, laws. He was not just building a home. He was building a nation. He was laying the foundation for a new world order, and he had placed her at its very heart. She looked out the panoramic window at the swirling nebulae and the crystalline trees. For the first time, the path forward was not a desperate scramble for survival through a barren wasteland. It was a clear, illuminated road toward a future she could not yet comprehend, but one that, for the first time, felt truly worthy of her sacrifice. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Unshackled Innocence. The sun of Hueco Mundo was a lie. It was a stark, white orb locked in a sky of perpetual daylight, casting no warmth and offering no comfort. Beneath its sterile glare, the game continued as it always did. The game was called Eternal Tag, and its rules were simple. Neliel was it, and her two brothers, Peshiwadish and Dondochakaburstan, had to run. They ran across the endless, rolling dunes of white sand, their laughter, one a nervous titter, other a booming guffaw, echoing in the vast emptiness. Your tooth alo, Nel-chan. Pesci shrieked, his lanky, insectoid body skittering sideways over the crest of a dune. My patented Pesci dash is far too advanced for your tiny legs. Quote, Bwahahaha. The mighty Dondochaka cannot be contained. The larger, spotted Arankar bellowed, his club-like arms waving in the air as he trundled along, his immense size making the sand shudder. Neliel giggled, a high, childish sound that was quickly stolen by the dry wind. "I'm gonna get you, both of you," she squealed, pumping her short legs as fast as they would go. Her cracked, cartoonish skull mask felt heavy on her head, and her green hair whipped across her face. The game was fun. It was always fun. It was all there was. Run, laugh, chase, and then do it all again tomorrow. But sometimes, when she reached the top of a particularly high dune and looked out across the horizon, she would see it. A shape, distant and shimmering in the heat haze. A fortress of impossible size. A place of sharp lines and shadows. Las Noches. And when she saw it, the sadness would come. It was a feeling that didn't belong to her, or at least, it didn't belong to the her that was playing tag. It was a cold, heavy stone in her chest, a memory of pain without the memory of its cause. It tasted like blood and betrayal. She would stop, her little chest heaving, and stare at the distant towers. And a single, confusing thought would bubble up from the deep, forgotten parts of her mind. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Then Pesci would call her name, or Dawn. Dakaka would trip over his own feet with a comical crash, and the moment would shatter. The sadness would recede, the confusing thought would vanish, and she would be Neliel again, the little girl in a world of sand and sunshine. Playing a game with her brothers. She would shake her head, a pout on her face, and resume the chase. It was on one such loop, as Dondochaka lay half buried in a dune. And Pesci performed a victory dance on his stomach, that the world changed. Two figures appeared on the horizon. They did not walk into view. They were simply not there one moment, and there the next. They stood atop a dune. Their forms silhouetted against the white sun. One was a woman, tall and regal, her presence a crushing weight of spiritual power that made the very air feel thick and heavy. The other was a man in stark black and white, and from him, there was nothing. A perfect, unnerving void. "Nell Chan. Behind me," Pesci yelped, leaping in front of her and striking a pose that was aimed to be intimidating but was mostly just awkward. He fumbled for the hilt of his sword, his single eye wide with fear. "Stay away from our mistress," Dondochaka roared, extricating himself from the sand and brandishing his own massive kanabo, his body a trembling mountain of protective intent. Neliel peeked out from behind Pesci's legs, her own heart thumping with a fear that felt much older and deeper than her small body. The woman was an Arankar, she could sense that much. A powerful one, a Vasto lord, surely. A queen, but it was the man who held her attention. He didn't feel like a threat. He felt calm, like the silence in her own mind after the sad thoughts went away. The two figures descended the dune, their movements impossibly graceful. The woman, who Harribel recognized from faded memories as the Tercera Espada, stopped a respectful distance away, her amber eyes surveying the scene with a cold, analytical gaze. The man, however, continued to approach. He stopped a few feet from her trembling guardians. And then he did something that shattered their aggression and left them blinking in confusion. He knelt. He sank to one knee in the white sand, bringing his face level with hers. It was an act of such simple, profound deference that it broke the tension completely. He was not a conqueror come to claim territory. He was not a predator seeking a meal. He was something else. "Neliel tu Odelschwank," he said. His voice was not loud, but it resonated within her, a calm, steady tone that soothed the frantic beating of her heart. "Your form is broken. Your spirit is caged." Neliel blinked, clutching Pesci's leg tighter. I don't know what you mean, Mithter." "He means no harm, Neliel," the tall woman said, her voice a low, powerful contralto. "Listen to him." Naruto's gaze remained fixed on Neliel. "A deep wound was inflicted upon you. Not just to your body, but to the very concept of yourself. To protect you from shattering completely, your own power forced you into this state. A child, a memory of innocence, but it is a cage, and you are not meant for a cage." He spoke with such certainty, such gentle authority, that Neliel found herself believing him. His words resonated with the sadness, with the feeling that things were not supposed to be this way. He was giving a name to the formless ache she had carried for so long. Can you fix it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Pesci looked down at her, his fear warring with his loyalty. Nel-chan, you can't trust them. We don't know who they are. They are right, Pesci, Neliel said, her voice surprisingly firm. She looked at the man's eyes, those voids with their silver stars. They held no deception. They held a truth so vast and absolute it was terrifying, yet also comforting. I'm tired of forgetting. Naruto offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. A wise decision. This will not hurt. It will be like waking from a long dream. He reached out a hand, not toward her cracked mask, but toward her forehead. His fingers were long and cool. Pesci and Dondochaka tensed, ready to fight and die, but a single, warning glance from Harribel froze them in place. They are. He cognized the look of a queen who would brook no interference. Neliel closed her eyes as his fingers made contact. The sensation was not one of power, but of release. It was as if a key had been turned in a lock deep within her soul that she never knew existed. She felt a gentle, probing energy, a weave of pure light and utter shadow, enter her. It did not force its way in. It flowed, seeking out the cracks in her spirit. The place where Neutra's treacherous blade had torn her asunder. She felt the energy begin to knit those cracks together, not with crude spiritual stitches, but by encouraging her own fragmented self to reform. To remember. A turquoise light, soft and warm, began to emanate from her small body, pulsing with a gentle rhythm. Her spiritual pressure, long suppressed and dormant, began to stir. It grew from a flicker to a flame to a bonfire, from a bonfire to a raging inferno of pure, untamed power. The desert air began to hum, the sand vibrating for miles in every direction. Harribel watched, her expression unreadable but her mind reeling. She had experienced his power herself, the fundamental reforging. But seeing it from the outside, watching him perform such a delicate, intricate act of spiritual surgery with the same calm he had shown when creating a cosmos, it was humbling on a level she had not thought possible. He was not just a king of immense power. He was an artist, and the very fabric of the soul was his medium. The surge of Reishi was a beacon in the empty world of Hueco Mundo. A flare that screamed power, life, challenge. And it did not go unanswered. A spiritual pressure, jagged and reeking of bloodlust and crazed obsession, ripped through the desert from the direction of Las Noches. It was a presence Harribel had not felt in years, but one she recognized instantly. The Quinta Espada, Neutra, she breathed, her hand instinctively moving to the hilt of her Zanpakuto. He arrived like a meteor, landing with a crash that sent a shockwave of sand and energy across the dunes. Neutra Gilga was a caricature of malice, a toweringly thin figure with an eye patch, a cruel, spoon-like grin plastered on his face, and a Zanpakuto the size of a small building slung over his shoulder. His single, wild eye fixed on the glowing form of Neliel, and a look of ecstatic, predatory glee spread across his face. Well, I knew I felt something familiar. So the bitch finally decided to come back to life. I've been waiting for this, Neliel. I'm so much stronger now. The fight we never got to finish. His gaze then fell upon Harribel. The trace. What are you doing here? Aizen ditch you too. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Then his eyes slid to Naruto, who had not moved, his hand still gently resting on Neliel's head, his back to the newcomer. And who's this clown? Doesn't matter. Anyone hanging around with you two is just another bug to squash. Naruto didn't even turn around. Your presence is an irritation. Leave this place. Neutra's grin widened into a psychotic leer. Irritation. Ha. I'm your fucking death sentence, pal. He vanished in a flicker of Sonido, reappearing directly behind Naruto, his massive Zanpakuto raised high. Die. The two-bladed axe head, a weapon that could cleave a Jillian in half, screamed downward. Harribel started to move, but she was too slow. The blade stopped. It was a mere inch from Naruto's head, held in place by two of his fingers. The impossible force of the blow was utterly negated, the kinetic energy absorbed into nothingness. Neutra's eye was wide with shock, his muscles straining against the immovable object. Your technique is crude, Naruto observed, his voice still calm, as if commenting on the weather. All force, no focus. You swing your power like a club, hoping to shatter what you cannot comprehend. What the hell are you? Neutra snarled, trying to pull his weapon back, only to find it held fast. I am the one who was correcting a mistake, Naruto replied. He twisted his fingers slightly. With a screech of protesting metal, the enormous Zanpakuto cracked, then shattered into 1,000 useless fragments. Neutra stumbled back, staring at the empty hilt in his hands. Then at Naruto, his psychotic glee finally replaced by a dawning, sputtering fear. My Zanpakuto, a tool is only as strong as its wielder. And you are weak, Neutra Gilga, Naruto said, finally turning to face him. You are not strong. You are merely loud. Your power is a cancer, born from envy and a pathetic insecurity. You despise the woman you could not defeat. So you struck her from behind. There is no honor in you. There is no strength. There is only a screaming child, terrified of being looked down upon. Every word was a physical blow, striking at the very core of Neutra's being. With a roar of pure rage and terror, he threw his arms wide. Pray, Santa Teresa, a torrent of spiritual energy erupted from him, his body twisting and elongating. He grew 4 more arms, each wielding a massive scythe, his mask fragment changing, his power skyrocketing. His resurrection was a true expression of his soul, a monstrous, multi-limbed insect of death, built for relentless, overwhelming slaughter. He stood there, panting, his 6 scythes poised. Now you see true power. I'll cut you into pieces so small. Naruto simply watched the transformation, his expression one of detached, academic curiosity, a crude amplification of instinct. You have merely given your weakness more arms with which to flail. A resurrection is meant to be the purest expression of a hollow's aspect of death. Yours is not domination. It is not even destruction. It is simple, pathetic jealousy. He raised a hand, palm open, toward the monstrous Neutra. Allow me to show you what it means to be unmade. He did not fire a arrow. He did not cast a spell. From his palm, a wave of pure, conceptual energy washed over Neutra. It was not destructive. It was corrective. Neutra screamed as the turquoise light enveloped him. His extra arms dissolved into light. His scythes evaporated into spiritual particles. His elongated form shrank and twisted, the hardened exterior of his resurrection flaking away like old paint. In a matter of seconds, he was forced back into his sealed state, kneeling in the sand, trembling and gasping, his power ripped away from him. No, impossible, my resurrection, he stammered, his mind unable to comprehend what had just happened. Naruto walked forward until he stood over the terrified Arankar. I told you, your existence is a flaw. He reached down and placed his hand on Neutra's head, directly over his hollow hole. And the mask is the symbol of your prison. He applied the slightest pressure. The bone of Neutra's mask cracked. The crack spread, spider webbing across its surface. Neutra screamed, a high, piercing wail of ultimate terror, as he felt his very identity, his ego, his consciousness, being erased. Please, stop, I'll do anything, he begged, his arrogance completely shattered. There is no place for you in the world I am building, Naruto said, his voice devoid of all emotion. But I am not a murderer. I am a rectifier. Return to the beginning. Return to the hunger that birthed you. With a final push, the mask shattered. Neutra's body convulsed. His humanoid form dissolved, melting away as his spirit violently devolved. He became a mindless, beast-like creature, a hulking, instinct-driven hollow of sharp claws and gnashing teeth, all traces of Neutra Gilga gone forever. The new creature roared, a mindless sound of pure instinct. Naruto regarded the beast for a moment, then flicked his wrist. A wave of force struck the hollow, sending it flying end over end into the sky, arcing toward the distant, unseen Mano's forest. It was a banishment, justice, not annihilation. Silence descended upon the desert once more. Pesci and Dondochaka stared, their mouths agape, at the spot where their tormentor had been so utterly and completely dismantled. Harribel stood like a statue, her mind trying to process the sheer, casual, absolute nature of the power she had just witnessed. He had not fought Neutra. He had edited him out of existence. Naruto turned, completely unfazed by the encounter, and looked back at Neliel. The light around her was reaching its crescendo. Her small, childlike form was dissolving within the brilliance, reforming, elongating. With a final, silent pulse of energy that washed across the desert, the light faded. Where the child had been, a woman now stood. She was tall and slender, yet possessed an aura of undeniable strength. Her long, green hair cascaded down her back. The cartoonish skull mask was gone, replaced by a more refined, horned fragment on the side of her head. A prominent 3 was tattooed on her back, marking her former rank. She wore the tattered remnants of a white Arankar uniform. But it was her eyes, large, hazel, and filled with a profound, soul-deep intelligence, that marked the greatest change. The fog was gone. Neliel II Odelschwenk was whole again. She raised a hand, looking at her long, graceful fingers. She touched her face, her throat. The memories came flooding back, not as a confusing sadness, but as a sharp, clear history. Neutra's obsessive challenges, the betrayal, the blow to her head, Shielaporo's involvement, her frantic desire to protect her Fracken, even as her mind shattered. The long, dark, dreamlike years of playing tag in the endless sun. It was all there. The pain, the humiliation, the loss. He looked at the three beings before her. At her loyal, weeping Fracken, who had stayed with her through it all. At the powerful, stoic queen, Harribel, who had witnessed her restoration. And finally, she looked at the man who had made it all possible. The man who had sought her out, healed a wound no one else could see, and had, with casual, terrifying grace, served injustice so complete and null upon her tormentor that it bordered on the mythic. Tears, hot and real, welled in her eyes and streamed down her cheeks. They were tears of grief for the years she had lost, but they were also tears of a gratitude so immense it filled her entire being. He had given her back her life. He had given her back herself. With a sob that was a mixture of sorrow and joyous relief, the former Tercera Pata fell to her knees in the white sand. She bowed her head until her forehead touched the ground, an act of ultimate submission and fealty that came from the very bottom of her restored soul. "My savior," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion but clear and strong for the first time in an age. "My king, my old life is ash. My new life belongs to you. My sword, my strength, my very being, I pledge it all to you. For now and for eternity." Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Unforeseen Variable. The Seraite, a bastion of immutable order for 1,000 years, was trembling. It was not a physical tremor, but a vibration in the very soul of the system. It began in the twitching, frantic halls of the 12th Division Barracks, the domain of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. Instruments designed to monitor the spiritual balance of the world screamed in a unified chorus of alarm. Technicians scrambled over one another, their calm, academic demeanors shattered into panicked efficiency. Data cascaded down enormous screens in waterfalls of incomprehensible numbers, all centered on a single, glaring truth: the spiritual ecosystem of Hueco Mundo had just been rewritten by an unknown hand. Captain Mayuri Kuretsuchi stood on his observation platform, a gleeful, manic grin stretched across his painted face. His golden fingernails clicked rapidly against a console as he absorbed the impossible data streams. "Fascinating, absolutely fascinating," he cackled, his voice echoing through the terrified silence of his subordinates. "Two Espada-level signatures, one of which I had personally catalogued, have been completely extinguished. Not killed, mind you, their specific spiritual waveforms have ceased to exist. Simultaneously, the long-dormant signature of Neliel II Odelschwenk has returned to its full former glory, and all three have converged on a single point alongside this." He tapped a screen displaying the new anomaly. It was not a spike or a wave. It was a perfect, symmetrical hole in the data. A point of absolute null, a void that was not an absence of energy, but an active, willful negation of it. "It's impossible, Captain," his lieutenant, Akon, stammered, adjusting his glasses. "No being can have zero spiritual presence. It defies every law of soul dynamics. It should be undetectable, yet its effects are monumental. It's a paradox." "Precisely," Mayuri shrieked with delight. "A beautiful, exquisite paradox. A new variable has been introduced into the great experiment. Prepare a full report for the Captain Commander. I want every scrap of data analyzed. I must understand this glorious aberration." The report, when it reached the chambers of the 1st Division, was met not with glee, but with a cold, heavy silence. The 13 captains of the Gote stood assembled in 2 rows before the throne of Captain Commander Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto. The air in the vast chamber was thick with tension, the recent victory over Aizen already feeling like a distant memory in the face of this new, incomprehensible event. The disappearance of Tear Harribel and the utter erasure of Neutra Gilga's Ryutsu, Yamamoto's ancient voice boomed, the sound of grinding stones. Followed by the re-emergence of Neliel Odelschwank. All three now reside within an energy signature our 12th division cannot even classify. Explain the meaning of this, Kuretsuchi. Mayuri, restraining his usual theatrics under the crushing weight of the commander's Ryutsu, gave a clinical summary. In short, Captain Commander, an entity of unknown origin and immeasurable capability has appeared. It has demonstrated the ability to permanently alter or erase beings of the highest spiritual order. It has, in essence, played God in the deserts of Hueco Mundo. A murmur went through the captains. So, a new enemy appears before Aizen's seat is even cold, Captain Kenpachi Zaraki grunted, a wide, bloodthirsty grin spreading across his face. Sounds like fun. Let me go. I'll find out how strong he is by cutting him. Restrain yourself, Kenpachi, Captain Byakuya Kuchiki said, his voice as cold and emotionless as ever. To attack an unknown entity without intelligence is the height of folly. We do not know its motives or its full capabilities. Byakuya is right, Captain Shunsui Kiraku added, tipping his straw hat down. This new fellow seems to be cleaning house in Hueco Mundo. For all we know, he could be doing us a favor. Rushing in might turn a potential bystander into an active enemy. A favor. Captain Soy Fawn snapped, her small frame rigid with indignation. This being has gathered two former Espada to its side. It is clearly building a power base. It is Aizen all over again, and we must crush it before it can fester. The debate raged, a clash of philosophies and personalities, until Yamamoto slammed the butt of his cane into the floor. The resulting boom silenced the chamber instantly. Enough, he growled, his eyes narrowed to slits. Any power that can alter the balance so decisively is, by its very nature, an enemy of that balance. It is a rogue element, a cancer that must be excised. Its motives are irrelevant, its existence is the threat. The Gote 13 will move to locate and eliminate this anomaly. That is my decree. His word was law, absolute and final. The captain straightened, accepting the command. Fu. Scale invasion of Hueco Mundo was imminent. A moment, Captain Commander, if I may. The voice was soft, polite, and yet it cut through the room's martial tension with the precision of a scalpel. Captain Retsu Unohana, the Kenpachi of the gentle smile, stepped forward. The reports state that this entity's energy is a void, she said, her ever-present smile not quite reaching her eyes. To attack a void is to risk being swallowed by it. Captain Kuretsuchi's own analysis admits we have no metric by which to measure this being's power. To send the Gote 13 in force against such an unknown is to risk a catastrophic loss. Should our methods prove ineffective? Yamamoto glared at her. Are you suggesting we do nothing, Captain of the 4th Division? Not at all, Unohana replied smoothly. I am suggesting we alter our approach. A full-scale military action is a declaration of war. I propose, instead, a mission of reconnaissance. A small, specialized team, sent to observe, to understand, and if possible, to make contact. Contact with such a creature is suicide. Soy Fawn protested. Not if the envoy is perceived as non-threatening, Unohana countered, her gaze unwavering. Do not send a warrior. Who will invite a battle? Send a physician. Someone whose purpose is to understand and to heal. It is an approach of de-escalation. A gesture of inquiry, not aggression. Yamamoto stroked his long beard, considering. The logic was sound. After the losses of the Winter War, another full-scale conflict against a foe they couldn't even understand was a risk he was reluctant to take. And who would you send on this medical inquiry? I would send my own lieutenant, Unohana said, her smile finally touching her eyes. Azane Katetsu. She is skilled, perceptive, and her spiritual pressure, while significant, is not so overwhelmingly aggressive as to be perceived as an immediate threat. She is the perfect choice to observe without provoking. A flicker of surprise went through the captains. Azane Katetsu was a capable lieutenant, known for her loyalty and healing Kido, but she was hardly a frontline diplomat or warrior. To send her into the den of a godlike being seemed a death sentence. But it was that very quality, her unassuming nature, that was the core of Unohana's plan. Yamamoto was silent for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. Very well. The full-scale mobilization will be put on hold. Captain Unohana, your lieutenant will undertake this mission. She will report back within 12 hours. If she fails, I will burn this anomaly from existence myself. Understood. Perfectly. Captain Commander, Unohana replied with a graceful bow. In the quiet, sterile halls of the 4th Division barracks, Azane Katetsu stood at attention before her captain. She had been briefed on the mission, and her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She, who was more comfortable with medical charts and diagnostic keto than confrontations, was to be the Sol. Envoy to a being that had made the entire Gote 13 pause. Captain, I will do my utmost to fulfill my duty, she said, her voice betraying only a slight tremor. Unohana's smile was kind, but her eyes were serious. Azane, your official mission is to gather intelligence. Your true mission is something different. I need you to forget that you are a Shinigami for a moment. Forget our laws, our traditions, our definitions of enemy and ally. She stepped closer, her presence immense and comforting at the same time. I do not want you to measure this being's power. I want you to ascertain its nature. Is it a being of malice, like Aizen, of instinct, like a hollow? Or is it something else entirely? Your greatest tool on this mission will not be your Kido or your Zanpakuto. It will be your empathy. Observe, listen, and above all, try to understand. The fate of our next course of action rests not on what you see, but on what you perceive. Azane felt the immense weight of that trust settle on her shoulders. It was a heavier burden than any order to fight. She bowed deeply. I understand, Captain. I will not fail you. Leading a small, 3-person team of her most trusted medics, Anne used a device provided by the 12th Division to follow the faint, paradoxical trail of the Void signature. The trail did not lead them to a Garganta, but to a place in the Dongai, the precipitous world between realms, where space itself seemed thin. It was a seam, a fold in the fabric of reality that was not natural. Taking a deep breath and steeling her resolve, Azane, followed by her team, stepped through. The first sensation was one of profound, overwhelming peace. She had expected a maelstrom of chaotic energy, a fortress of dark power. Instead, she found herself standing on a beach of fine, white sand under a sky of swirling lavender and indigo nebulae. Crystalline trees hummed with a soft, resonant energy, and a vast, calm lake mirrored the impossible cosmos above. The air itself felt alive, pure, and invigorating. It was not just breathable, it was nourishing. The ever-present weight of her duties, the anxiety of the mission, it all seemed to lessen, soothed by the very atmosphere of the realm. This was not a fortress. It was a sanctuary. It felt more sacred than any temple in the Seraite. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Lieutenant Katetsu, what is this place? One of her subordinates whispered in awe. Before Azane could answer, 2 figures appeared before them, moving with a silent, fluid grace. One was the tall, blonde queen she recognized from intelligence briefings as Tir Harribel. The other was the green-haired woman whose spiritual pressure now blazed with the strength of a senior captain, Neliel II Odelschwenk. Their faces were hard, their stances wary and hostile. Shinigami, Neliel hissed, the name an epithet. A flicker of her old rage at the betrayal she had suffered surfaced in her eyes. You are not welcome here. Harribel was silent, but her hand rested on the hilt of her Zanpakuto, her cold gaze promising swift annihilation. The peaceful atmosphere was instantly shattered by a tension so thick Azane could barely breathe. Her team instinctively reached for their own swords. We come in peace, Azane managed, raising her hands in a placating gesture, her voice sounding small in the vast open space. We are a medical envoy from the Gote 13, sent only to. You were sent to spy, Harribel cut in, her voice low and dangerous. Your Gote fears what it does not understand, so it sends its assassins in the guise of physicians. That is not true, Azane protested, though a part of her knew the woman was not entirely wrong. It is enough. The voice came from behind Harribel and Neliel. Naruto appeared between them, his presence so sudden and absolute that it felt as if he had been there all along. He placed a gentle hand on each of their shoulders. They are guests. Stand down. The 2 former Espada, despite their clear hostility toward the Shinigami, immediately relaxed their stances and stepped back, their obedience to him instant and unquestioning. Azane stared, astonished by the authority he commanded. Naruto turned his attention to her. His eyes, those twin voids, seemed to absorb the light around them. He was not intimidating in the way Yamamoto was, nor menacing like Kenpachi. He was simply absolute. Azane Katetsu, lieutenant of the 4th Division, he said, his voice the calm center of the universe. Your captain commander wishes to know if I am a threat. Your captain wants to know what I am. And you wish to understand why a place like this can exist. Azane was speechless. He had not just read her mind. He had perceived the layered intentions of her entire mission from its inception. Tell me, physician, he continued, taking a slow step forward. What is the purpose of the Shinigami? The question caught her off guard. She fell back on her training, on the catechism she had learned since she was a student. We are purifiers. We guide the souls of the dead to the soul society and maintain the balance between the worlds. A noble answer, Naruto said, his tone devoid of sarcasm. Which made his next words cut even deeper. And where do these souls you guide end up? In the serene, ordered Seraite where you live, or in the squalor and chaos of the Rukongai, left to starve, to suffer, to be preyed upon for centuries until their luck allows them to be reborn? What kind of guidance is that? Azane flinched. She had no answer. She had always been troubled by the state of the Rukongai. You speak of balance, Naruto continued, his voice relentless in its calm logic. Yet your predecessors committed genocide against the Quincy for fear of their power upsetting that balance. You hunted them to near extinction. Was that a balanced act? Or was it the act of a fearful regime eliminating a rival power? The Quincy were destroying hollows, threatening the cycle, Azane began, but he cut her off. The cycle you enforce is flawed. It is a system built on suffering, propped up by rigid, fearful laws, and maintained by a mutilated king you keep chained in a crystal prison. You do not maintain balance. You enforce stagnation. He stopped before her. He was not angry. He was simply stating facts as he saw them. He raised a hand, and for a terrifying moment, Azane thought he was going to strike her. Instead, he gently placed 2 fingers against her chest, directly over her sakatsu, the linchpin of a Shinigami's spiritual power. Your very existence is a testament to the imbalance, he said softly. You see your power as Raryoku, a current of energy to be controlled. You have never seen what your soul truly looks like. His touch sent a jolt through her, not of energy, but of pure perception. Her senses twisted, turned inward. For the first time, she saw her own soul. It was a magnificent, complex thing, a glowing orb of intricate, weaving threads of light, representing her spirit. Her memories, her power. It was beautiful, but as he guided her focus, she also saw the flaws. She saw tiny snags, places where the threads were frayed, areas where the light seemed dimmer. She saw the inherited limitations of her Shinigami form, the subtle shackles placed upon her potential by 1,000 years of unchanged tradition. Then, through his touch, he gave her a glimpse of what he was. She saw a vision of a soul that was a perfect, spinning sphere of intertwined light and shadow, flawless, harmonious, and infinite in its potential. A soul in a state of perfect, dynamic equilibrium. The vision lasted only a second, but it shattered her entire worldview. She stumbled back, gasping, her hand pressed to her chest. She looked at him now not as a potential enemy, but as a being so far beyond her comprehension that the very idea of fighting him was laughable. It would be like a single drop of water declaring war on the ocean. Go back and give your report, Azane Katetsu, Naruto said. His voice pulling her from her shock. Tell your commander that he is right to be afraid, but not of me. He should be afraid of the rot he has allowed to fester in his own garden for a millennium. A new age is dawning. One of balance. He and his Gote can choose to be cleansed by its light, or be washed away by the coming tide. He turned and walked back toward the obsidian citadel, Harribel and Neliel falling into step behind him. Azane stood frozen for a long moment, the echo of his words and the vision of her own flawed soul burning in her mind. Her subordinates looked at her, their faces pale with a mixture of fear and awe. Lieutenant, one of them asked timidly. Azane shook her head, trying to clear it. She had a report to give. But the simple, black and white truth that Yamamoto demanded no longer existed. She had been sent to identify a variable, and had instead found an entirely new equation. She turned and led her team back through the seam, leaving the impossible cosmos of the Nexus behind. The gray, ordered sky of the Seraite had never felt so oppressive, so dull, so utterly and completely wrong. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Heretic's Scripture. In a fold of the world, tucked within a pocket dimension of enduring shadow, lay the city of Sanctorum Umbri. It was a place of fading light and long memory. Unlike the Wandenreich's stark, arrogant fortresses of ice and monolithic stone, the Sanctorum was a city of graceful, sweeping silver arches and delicate spires that had long ago tarnished. It was a city built not for conquest, but for contemplation. Now, it was a beautiful, sprawling tomb, inhabited by ghosts who still drew breath. Within the city's heart, in the vast, silent scriptorium where the air smelled of ancient paper and dust, Alara Volstand carefully traced a line of crumbling text with a silver-gloved finger. The book before her, the Codex Argenti, was the oldest surviving text of her people, its pages brittle as autumn leaves. Its high Quincy script predated the common dialect by a millennium, speaking of a time before Yuwatch, before the schism of the worlds, before the Quincy were defined solely by their hatred of hollows. Alara was a scholar, not a soldier. Her battlefield was the slow, methodical erosion of time upon truth. While the rest of her people, the last 100 souls of the Volstand enclave, lived in quiet fear. Awaiting the inevitable day Yuwatch's jagged army would find their sanctuary, Alara fought back with knowledge. She sought a truth, a hope, buried in the scripture of a faith that the rest of their race had long since abandoned as heresy. A low, resonant chime echoed through the scriptorium, a sound she hadn't heard in her lifetime. It was the Resonance Glock, the great silver bell in the city's central spire. Tuned to detect not crude Ryutsu, but the very harmony and disharmony of spiritual particles in the cosmos. It was an alarm that had been silent for 500 years. Dropping her delicate instruments, Alara gathered her robes and ran. She moved with a fluid, silent grace, her silver-white hair a stark banner against the city's gloom. The elders would be convening in the council chamber. The bell meant only one thing: the universe had changed. She arrived as the last of the 3 elders took their seats upon worn, silver thrones. They were ancient, the IR faces maps of grief and determination. Elder Theron, the council head, looked at her, his expression grim. Report, Scribe Alara. Our long-range sensors are in chaos. The bell has rung. What have you found? Alara stepped into the center of the circular chamber, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a terrifying, electrifying hope. She activated a projection device, and a star map of Reishi distribution filled the air. Elders, approximately 12 hours ago, the spiritual architecture of Hueco Mundo underwent a fundamental restructuring. 2 Vasto Lord-class signatures were extinguished, another was restored. And all have now been subsumed by a new phenomenon. She manipulated the projection, zooming in on a point that glowed not with light, but with a profound darkness. It was the same void the Shinigami had seen. But the Quincy sensors interpreted it differently. The Shinigami see it as a void, a lack of energy, she explained, her voice clear and precise. They are wrong. Our instruments, tuned to the purity of Reishi, see it for what it truly is. It is not an absence. It is a perfect equilibrium. An absolute harmonization of positive and negative spiritual particles. A nullpunct. A null point. Elder Maeve, a woman whose eyes held the weariness of centuries, leaned forward. A null point. That is a theoretical concept, a myth. It was, Alara corrected gently, her excitement making her voice tremble slightly. Until today. She swiped the air, and the star map was replaced by a page of glowing, ancient script, a passage from the Codex Argenti. Listen to the scripture, from the Genesis Canticle. Alara read, her voice ringing with passion. Before the King of Souls was fractured, before the shadow of the hollow was cast, there was the Ausgleichkönig, the King of Balance. He was the whole, the perfect synthesis of light and void. And his domain was not of this world or the next, but a nexus of perfect harmony, from which all life could spring without hunger or decay. When he returns, the nullpunct will be the sign, a silence in the cosmic scream, and the fractured worlds shall tremble at the coming of the true creation. Silence hung in the chamber, thick and heavy. The prophecy was the core of their schism with Yuwatch. While he preached a gospel of Quincy supremacy and the conquest of all worlds under a single, vengeful God-King, their creed spoke of restoration. Of a return to a lost, perfect balance. You watch as a false king, Alara stated, her conviction absolute. A cancer born from the Soul King's own fragmented power. He seeks only to absorb all things into himself. A conquest born of fear and ego. The prophecy speaks of a creator, a rectifier. Elders, I believe the Osgleichkönig has returned. Heresy. Elder Cassian, the most cautious of the three, slammed his fist on his throne. You speak of myths. You watch as real. His power is absolute. The Wandenreich's strength is undeniable. We have survived this long by hiding, not by chasing fables. Hiding is a slow death, Elder. Alara countered, her voice rising. A Jagdarmi patrol breached our outer wards last month. They are closing in. We have two choices. Wait here for our inevitable extinction. Or embrace the one hope our most sacred text has ever offered us. She bowed her head deeply. Allow me to go. Let me undertake the pilgrimage. I will find this null point and verify the truth of it. If it is a false hope, then we have lost nothing but one life. But if it is true, it is the salvation of our people and our faith. The elders debated for what felt like an eternity, their hushed, urgent voices echoing in the ancient chamber. Finally, Elder Theron rose, his face etched with a terrible resolve. The scribe is right. To do nothing is to accept oblivion. You will go, Alara Volstand. You will carry the faith of the last true Quincy. Find this, King of Balance. See if he is the truth of our past, or the end of our future. May the original light guide your path. Dressed in a form-fitting combat uniform of dark, reishi-absorbent silver material, Alara stood at the precipice of the Sanctorum, a hidden gate that opened into the vast, shifting corridors of the Schattenbereich. The Shadow Realm. She was armed with Silberegen, a spirit weapon that could manifest as either a delicate, elegant bow or twin daggers, and carried a satchel containing the Codex Argenti and survival rations. Elder Theron met her at the gate. Your path will be perilous. Yuwatch's patrols are more numerous than ever. I am a child of the shadows, Elder. They will not find me, she said with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. It is not their eyes I fear for you, but your own, he said, placing a frail hand on her shoulder. You carry the hope of us all, Alara. Do not let that hope blind you to a potential danger. She nodded, then activated her Herenkyaku. She did not erupt in a flash of blue light like the Wandenreich soldiers. Her movement was a silent, graceful dissolving into the shadows. A reishi-perfected technique that left no trace. She became a silver blur, a whisper in the dark dimension. The Schattenbereich was a world of shifting blue blah, CK platforms and flowing rivers of raw reishi. For days, Alara traveled, navigating the treacherous, unstable landscape with the skill of a master. She sustained herself on concentrated reishi tablets. Her senses stretched to their absolute limit, constantly feeling for the resonance of harmony, that was her goal, and the resonance of tyranny, that was her hunter. On the third day, she felt it. A patrol of 5, Jagdarmi. Their spiritual signatures were harsh, disciplined, and utterly without mercy. They were close. Alara immediately dropped into a deep trench of shadow, pressing herself at against a wall of solidified darkness. She drew upon the ambient reishi, weaving a complex illusion, a lichtfall, or light trap. She created a faint, fleeting image of herself, a flicker of silver hair and a flash of white cloak. Several hundred yards away, as she expected, the patrol immediately gave chase, firing a volley of crackling Heilig file arrows at the decoy. The moment they were gone, she darted in the opposite direction, her movements swift and economical. But she had underestimated their leader. A sixth sense, a hunter's instinct, made one of them pause. A tall, scarred Quincy with the rank of captain turned, his eyes narrowing as he sensed the faint disturbance of her real escape. He raised his bow, a massive, brutalist weapon, and fired a single, thicker arrow, not at her, but at a floating crystalline structure above her path. For the glory of Yuwatch. The arrow struck, and the structure exploded, raining down razor-sharp shards of solidified reishi. Alara twisted in midair, her agility pushed to its limit. She avoided the worst of it, but a single, large shard sliced across her side, tearing through her uniform and drawing a line of fire across her ribs. She grit her teeth against the pain, pushing forward without a sound and diving through a weak point in the dimensional wall, tumbling out into the chaos of the Dongai. She didn't stop until she was sure she wasn't followed. Her breath coming in ragged gasps, her side bleeding freely. She was wounded, but she was alive. And she was close. The resonance was stronger here, a beautiful, calming hum that acted as a balm on her frayed nerves. She followed it to its source, a quiet, stable pocket of space. A seam. To her Quincy senses, it was not a tear or a flaw. It was a perfectly woven point in the tapestry of reality, a place of such exquisite balance that it sang to her very soul. This was it, the entrance to the nexus. Clutching the bleeding wound in her side and holding the precious codex to her chest, she stepped through. The immediate sensation was one of coming home to a place she had never been. The pure, nourishing atmosphere, the serene cosmos above, the gentle hum of the crystal. In Flora, it was all exactly as the Genesis Canticle had described. Tears of relief and awe welled in her eyes. It was real. The prophecy was real. She took a staggering step forward onto the white sand, her vision swimming slightly from pain and exhaustion. Her quest was over. She had found it. You are far from home, daughter of the lost creed. The voice was not a sound, but a presence that bloomed in her mind. Alara's head snapped up. He stood before her, not 10 feet away. The being in black and white, with eyes like dying stars. He had not been there a moment before. He had not walked, or run, or used Herenkyaku. He had simply arrived. She stared, her scholar's mind trying and failing to analyze him. His spiritual state was precisely as she had detected, a perfect, impossible null point. He was the center of this realm's harmony. He was the living embodiment of the scripture she clutched in her hands. He looked at her wound, at the ancient book she protected more than her own life, and his placid, neutral expression held a flicker of something she could only describe as ancient curiosity. Tell me, he said, his voice a calm river in the silence of her mind, what truth do you seek in my garden? Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A spark on concrete. It was a Tuesday, and the world felt like it had a migraine. Tatsuki Arisawa landed the final kick of the kata, her form perfect, her GI snapping in the quiet of the dojo. But the satisfaction wasn't there. A low, thrumming pressure had been building behind her eyes all day, a feeling shared by half the student body of Karakura High. People were jumpy, irritable. Fights had broken out over nothing in the hallways, and even the air-headed Orihime had been unusually quiet, her normally vibrant presence seeming faded, like a photograph left in the sun. Tatsuki called it post-war weirdness. Ever since the big, crazy sky battle she wasn't supposed to know about, Karakura town had never felt quite right. Sometimes the shadows seemed too long, or you'd hear whispers on the wind that were just the rustling of leaves. Usually, she could shrug it off. She was grounded. She had her fists, her training, her friends. She was the solid thing in a world that had apparently gone insane. But today was different. The pressure was worse. The world felt thin, stretched taut, like the skin of a drum. Good form, Arisawa, her sensei grunted, bowing. But your focus is off. Your spirit is agitated. Just a headache, sensei, she lied, bowing back. It wasn't a lie, not really. It just felt like a headache that was happening to the whole town at once. She walked home as the sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe at the edge of her vision. The usual cacophony of the city, the distant traffic, the chatter of people. The hum of electricity was muffled, subdued, as if she were listening to it through a wall of cotton. It was deeply unsettling. She picked up her pace, the familiar desire to check on Orihime. To make sure her ditzy friend hadn't accidentally walked into traffic, bubbling up in her chest. That protective instinct was the core of her. Ichigo had his weird soul reaper thing, Chad had his arm. Oryu had his, whatever Oryu did. But Tatsuki, she had her fists and an ironclad will to keep her people safe. It was her pride. It was her job. She turned onto her own residential street. A quiet lane of neat houses and carefully tended gardens. And the world broke. The pressure behind her eyes exploded into a nauseating wave of vertigo. The air grew thick and cold. All sound vanished. Not just muffled, but gone. Erased. The vibrant colors of the evening sky, the warm orange of the streetlights that had just flickered on, the green of the hedges, it all bled away, draining into a uniform, sickly gray. In the middle of the street, reality was unraveling. A creature was manifesting. It wasn't bursting into existence like the hollows she'd caught glimpses of before. It was leaking into the world, a formless, tar-like blob of spiritual corruption. It had no face, no limbs, just a swirling mass of oily blackness from which dozens of milky white, unblinking eyes stared out in every direction. As it solidified, its influence spread. The neat asphalt of the road rippled and turned the color of wet cement, its texture becoming soft and yielding like quicksand. A lamppost bent at a 90-degree angle, its light flickering and dying. The world in a 50-foot radius around the creature was being overridden, turned into a silent, colorless, textureless nightmare. Two figures in black robes appeared in a flash of movement. Shinigami, the local patrol. One of them, a kid who looked barely older than her, shouted something she couldn't hear and charged, his sword glowing. The instant he entered the gray zone, his blade warped, twisting like heated plastic. The creature extended a tendril of black ooze, and when it touched the Shinigami, he didn't scream. He simply dissolved, his body turning into a gray, slushy pile on the warped ground. His partner froze in horror, then turned to flee, only for the asphalt to liquefy beneath his feet, trapping him. Another tendril shot out, and he too was gone. Tatsuki's blood ran cold. Her body was screaming at her to run, to hide, to get away from the thing that had just erased two soul reapers without a sound. Her legs were shaking, but then she saw it. At the far end of the street, just beyond the expanding edge of the gray zone, was the park. And under a tree, she saw a familiar flash of bright orange hair. Orihime. She was with two other classmates. Frozen, staring in pure, uncomprehending terror at the silent nightmare unfolding towards them. And in that instant, fear was burned away by a white-hot, possessive rage. Not here. The thought was a roar in her mind. This is my town, my street. Those are my friends. You do not get to touch them. Something inside her snapped. The world of logic and reason, of flying kicks and dojo rules, fell away. There was only the monster, her friends, and the space between them that she had to cross. Get the hell away from them. She screamed, and this time, the sound was not muffled. It was a raw, primal roar that tore through the unnatural silence. She charged. It was a stupid, suicidal act, and she knew it. But her body moved on its own, fueled by years of training and a lifetime of being the protector. As she sprinted toward the gray zone, a strange power erupted from within her. The asphalt beneath her running shoes didn't soften. It hardened, turning a glossy, obsidian black. A dark, violent energy, the color of a deep bruise, swirled around her fists. It was a power born from the very core of her being. The object of her pride was her physical strength, her role as the unbreakable shield for her friends. And so, her soul answered, rejecting the monster's unreality by asserting its own, absolute reality. My fists are real. The ground I stand on is real. And you are an intruder. The power was agony. It felt like every muscle in her body was being torn apart and stitched back together with burning wire. But she didn't stop. She burst into the gray zone. Her own personal aura of defiant reality pushing back against the corruption. The monster's many eyes swiveled to focus on her, the first thing that had successfully resisted its influence. With a final, desperate roar, she threw a punch. Her fist, wreathed in dark energy, slammed into the creature's gelatinous side. There was a wet, sickening impact, and for a glorious, impossible moment, the creature actually recoiled. A shockwave of normal color and sound erupted from the point of impact. But the victory was fleeting. The feedback from her own untamed power was catastrophic. An electric shock of pure agony shot up her arm, and her vision exploded into a field of white. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the ground, her body spasming, the dark energy flickering wildly around her. The monster, enraged, reformed itself. It loomed over her fallen form, a great, oily black wave of silent death, ready to snuff out the one spark of defiance it had encountered. Tatsuki closed her eyes, her last thought a bitter regret that she hadn't been strong enough. And then, a zone of absolute calm descended. The monster froze. The gray, warped reality around it snapped back into perfect, pristine normalcy. The color rushed back into the world, the sounds of the evening returned, the bent lamppost straightened with a metallic groan. The slushy piles that had been the Shinigami reformed into their unconscious bodies. Tatsuki forced her eyes open. A man stood between her and the creature. He wore simple black and white robes, his hair was the color of bleached bone, and his presank. He was an anchor of absolute stability in the chaos. He hadn't run or flown in. He was just there. He regarded the multi-eyed horror with an expression of profound disinterest, like a man looking at a cockroach on his kitchen floor. A failed experiment, a voice echoed in Tatsuki's mind, calm and clear. An orphan of ambition, left to fester in the cracks of the world. Your existence is a discordant note. The creature, sensing a threat on a level it couldn't comprehend, shrieked, a silent, psychic scream of terror, and lunged. The man didn't move, he simply raised one hand. He did not fire a blast of energy or draw a sword. He made a gentle, gathering motion with his fingers, as if pulling threads from a tapestry. The reality-warping hollow was unraveled. Its form came apart, not in a gory explosion, but in a clean, systematic deconstruction. The black ooze separated into pure, negative spiritual energy. The white eyes dissolved into pockets of tormented human souls. The corrupting influence was gathered up like a fine dust. The man closed his fist, and it all simply ceased to exist. Corrected. The entire battle, from his arrival to its end, had taken less than 10 seconds. He then turned his attention to Tatsuki. She was still on the ground, her own power now the only chaotic thing left, the dark energy surging painfully under her skin, threatening to tear her apart from the inside. He walked over and knelt beside her. His eyes were like black holes, and for a second, her breath caught in her throat. He reached out and placed a cool hand on her forehead. The wild, agonizing energy within her was instantly soothed. It didn't vanish. It settled, retreating from a raging fire to a warm, dormant ember deep within her. The pain stopped. The object of your pride is your ability to protect. His voice filled her head again, a calm, factual statement. A noble anchor for your soul's power. But an anchor without a chain is just a weight that will drown you. You are a fullbringer. Your power has awakened. He stood, looking down at her, his expression unreadable. I can teach you to forge the chain. To control the power that is rightfully yours. To become the protector you truly wish to be. He offered her a choice, not a command. A chance. An explanation for the impossible thing that had just happened to her. Tatsuki lay on the cool, blessedly normal asphalt of her blessedly normal street. Her friends were safe. The monster was gone. And this impossible person was talking about souls and chains and power. In the distance, the first sirens began to wail. A sound of the normal world trying to reassert itself. She stared up at him, her tough girl facade completely shattered, her mind a whirlwind of 1,000 questions. What the hell just happened? Who the hell are you? Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A Table of Kings and Queens. The chamber was a place of silent, waiting grandeur. It sat at the heart of the obsidian citadel, a cavernous, circular hall whose ceiling was not a ceiling at all, but a direct view of the swirling lavender and gold cosmos of the Nexus. In the center of the polished black floor, a single piece of furniture had formed, a massive, low, circular table carved from the same seamless stone. It had no head, no seat of honor. It was a table of equals. 5 women occupied the space, yet the silence was so profound it felt like a physical presence. They were a collection of contradictions, an assembly of mutual enemies forced into a state of tense neutrality. On one side of the room stood Azane Katetsu. The Shinigami lieutenant was ramrod straight, her hand never straying far from the hilt of her zanpakuto. Her face was a mask of formal politeness, but her spirit radiated a nervous energy that was practically a scream in the quiet hall. On the opposite side stood Alara Volstand. The Quincy scholar was the picture of calm, analytical observation, her silver robes immaculate despite the wound she was nursing in her side. Her hands were clasped before her, but her cool, gray eyes were fixed on Azane with an ancient, institutional hatred that was as much a part of her as her own bones. It was the gaze of a survivor looking at the uniform of a legion that had orchestrated her people's extinction. Near the table, a united front of 2, were the Arankar. Cheer Harribel sat in a high-backed chair that had flowed out of the floor to accommodate her. Her posture queenly, her expression unreadable. She watched the Quincy and the Shinigami with the detached interest of a predator observing two lesser species display their territorial rituals. Beside her, Neliel tu Odelschwank stood, her arms crossed. The playful innocence of her child form was gone, replaced by the sharp, intelligent gaze of a warrior who had seen betrayal firsthand. Her focus, too, was on Azane, and it was not friendly. Into this tableau of silent hostility, Naruto arrived. He was not accompanied by a flash of movement or a surge of power. He simply stepped out of the empty air. And with him was the fifth woman. Tatsuki Arasawa stumbled forward, her eyes wide, her jaw slack. Her modern, athletic clothes, track pants and a worn karate club shirt, were so jarringly out of place they might as well have been from another dimension. Which, she supposed, they were. She stared at the impossible sky, the glowing crystal pillars, and the assembly of supernatural women who looked like they'd just walked out of a high fantasy anime convention. Holy, she breathed, the curse dying on her lips. Her brain, which was still trying to process the concept of a sludge monster being unraveled like a ball of yarn, promptly shut down. Be at ease, Naruto's voice echoed in the minds of all present. He gestured toward the circular table. There is much to discuss. He took no seat himself but remained standing, a calm, neutral arbiter. The women, drawn by his will, moved to the table. The seating arrangement was a diagram of their divisions. Ella, Ra and Azane took seats directly opposite one another, a vast expanse of black stone between them. Harribel and Neliel sat together, a unified block. Tatsuki, after a moment of dazed hesitation, dropped into a chair as far from everyone else as possible, looking like a high school student who'd accidentally walked into a meeting of the UN Security Council. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint, resonant hum of the citadel. It was Neliel, ever the most direct, who finally shattered the silence. Her gaze was fixed on Azane. A Shinigami, she said, her voice dripping with a restrained venom that surprised Tatsuki. I was betrayed by an Irankar, but it was your kind who built the system that made his ambition possible. You are the jailers of the world, and your prisons are always full. Why are you here? Before Azane could formulate a polite, diplomatic response, Alara spoke, her voice cool and sharp as ice. A pertinent question, though I would use the term butchers, rather than jailers. Their methods with my people were far more direct. Azane stiffened, her face paling. The Quincy War was a necessary tragedy to prevent the collapse of the worlds. A necessary tragedy. Alara's voice was dangerously soft. That is what the conqueror always calls the genocide he commits. You feared our power to destroy hollows, so you destroyed us. For 1,000 years, you have hunted the survivors like dogs. Do not lecture me on balance, butcher. Your Yawach sought to kill the Soul King and destroy everything. Azane retorted, her composure finally cracking. My Yawach. Alara gave a cold, brittle laugh. The man you call Yawach is a false king, a heretic to my faith. But his sins do not absolve yours. You are all the same, you Shinigami. You wrap your tyranny in the robes of order and call it justice. Enough. The shout, raw and human and utterly exasperated, slammed into the argument like a physical blow. Tatsuki had both hands flat on the table, her knuckles white. All eyes, mortal and immortal, turned to her. Just shut up, all of you. She snapped, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration. I don't know what a Quincy is, and I don't give a damn about your 1,000-year-old war. I have no idea who any of you are. 2 hours ago, my biggest problem was my karate sensei telling me my focus was off. Now I'm in space heaven with a shark lady, a sad-eyed giantess, a goth elf, and a soul reaper who looks like she's about to cry, all arguing about ancient history. She took a ragged breath, pointing a shaky finger at Naruto. And you show up, turn some kind of nightmare monster into confetti, tell me I'm something called a Fullbringer, and then drag me here. Somebody needs to start explaining things in simple, modern Japanese, or I swear to God, I'm going to start hitting things, and I don't care if they're immortal. Her outburst, so mundane and so visceral, hung in the air, a splash of gritty reality in a sea of cosmic drama. The ancient hatreds and complex politics suddenly seemed absurd. It was the opening Naruto had been waiting for. She is right, his voice stated, drawing their attention. Your conflicts are echoes of a dying age. They are the death throes of the imbalanced worlds you have left behind. You cling to them because they are all you have ever known. He began to move around the table, his presence a focal point of absolute calm. He stopped behind Alara's chair. Alara Volstand, he said. You are the last scribe of a dying faith, cast out as a heretic by the false king of your people, hunted by those you should call brother. He moved behind Azane. Azane Katetsu. You are a loyal soldier of a stagnant empire, a healer who has begun to question if the order she serves is truly just, or merely old. He moved to stand between Harribel and Neliel. Cheer Harribel, a queen betrayed and discarded by a king who saw your loyalty as a disposable tool. Neliel tu Odelschwenk, a knight betray, ed and broken by a comrade consumed by a jealousy your system actively fostered. Finally, he stood behind Tatsuki. And Tatsuki Arasawa, a human who has just learned that the solid ground beneath her feet is a fragile veil. And that she no longer belongs to the simple world she has spent her entire life protecting. He returned to his original position, his gaze sweeping over all of them. Look at each other. You are not Shinigami, Quincy, or Arankar. You are all exiles. You are all survivors of broken systems and false kings. Your shared experience is not the banner under which you once fought, but the fact that those banners have failed you. He let the weight of that statement settle. The anger in the room had subsided, replaced by a grudging, uncomfortable introspection. They had been defined for so long by their opposition to each other that they had never considered their shared disillusionment. The worlds you came from are built on flawed principles, Naruto continued, his voice taking on a teaching tone. Soul Society offers order, but it is an order without justice, built on the suffering of the Rukongai and the fear of change. Hueco Mundo offers freedom, but it is a freedom without purpose. A chaotic cycle of consumption that leads only to despair. The Wandenreich offers power, but it is a power without balance, a vengeful crusade destined to consume itself. All are failed states. All are destined to crumble. He gestured to the cosmos swirling above them. This is the nexus. This is the alternative. A sanctuary built upon the principle that was lost, balance. Here, power will serve a purpose greater than survival. Freedom will be guided by a justice that is true, not traditional. And order will be the natural outcome of a harmonious system, not a cage imposed upon it. He looked at each of them. His gaze direct and piercing. I did not bring you here to be my soldiers or my subjects. I brought you here because you are the first to awaken to the truth of your broken worlds. This is not a prison. It is not a conscripted army. It is a foundation, and a foundation needs pillars. I offer you a choice. You can return to your former lives, to the echoes of your dead-end wars. Or you can stay. You can become the first pillars of this new world. You will be my royal court. You will help me write its laws. You will guide its growth. You will be the architects of the age to come. A profound silence filled the chamber. He was offering them not just a safe haven, but a purpose. A chance to build the world they had all, in their own ways, wished for. Harribel was the first to break the silence. She rose from her chair, her presence every bit the queen. I was a queen of a kingdom of sacrifice. I accept the role of first pillar in a kingdom of purpose. She looked at Naruto, a new light in her eyes. My king. Neliel stood as well, a brilliant, genuine smile on her face. You saved me from the past. I would be honored to help you build the future. Alara slowly rose, clutching the Codex Argenti to her chest. My entire life has been a search for the truth of this prophecy. To see it made manifest, to serve it, is the greatest honor my faith could bestow. She inclined her head. I will be your scribe, your lorekeeper. Azane hesitated, the conflict raging within her. To stay was to betray the Seraite, everything she had ever known. To leave was to turn her back on the one place that had offered a genuine answer to the doubts that had plagued her for years. With a deep, shuddering breath, she stood. I cannot renounce my home. But I cannot deny the truth of what you have shown me. I will stay, as an ambassador, and, as a student of balance. All eyes finally turned to the last woman at the table. Tatsuki was still sitting, looking at the assembled court of supernatural royalty with a dumbfounded expression. This was insane. This was all completely, certifiably insane. She just wanted to go home, patch up her karate GI, and pretend none of this ever happened. But she couldn't. She could still feel the echo of that wild, untamed power inside her. She was a freak now. She couldn't go back to her old life. And maybe she didn't want to. She looked at Naruto, at the impossible calm in his eyes. He wasn't crazy. In fact, he was the sanest seeming person in the whole damn universe. With a groan that was equal parts resignation and exhaustion, she pushed her chair back and stood up. Fine, she sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. I'm in, but I'm laying down some ground rules. Rule 1. No more talking in ancient poetry or prophecies. Use simple words. Rule 2. Somebody explains what the hell a Fullbringer is, right now, and it had better not involve sparkles. Rule 3. She looked around at the powerful, serious faces. Everyone needs to seriously lighten up. A small, genuine smile touched Neliel's lips. Alara raised a curious eyebrow. Even Harribel's stoic expression seemed to soften almost imperceptibly at the edges. For the first time, a flicker of something other than tension, a fragile, tentative camaraderie, sparked in the great hall. They were a court of misfits. A queen of predators, a knight of sorrows, a heretic scribe, a disillusioned healer, and a human girl with fists of iron. And at their center stood the silent, patient king who had gathered them all. The foundation was laid. The pillars were in place. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The three-front threat. A semblance of peace, fragile and new, had settled within the nexus. In the great circular chamber, the first court was in session. The lesson of the day was the nature of their new home. Naruto stood at the center of the room, explaining the symbiotic relationship the realm had with its inhabitants. It is not merely a place of passive safety, his voice resonated in their minds. The Nexus is a dynamic environment. Your will, your spiritual essence, bleeds into it. The stronger and more harmonious you become, the more stable and powerful the realm itself grows. In turn, its purity nourishes and refines you. It is a cycle of mutual growth. Tatsuki, who was trying to get her Fullbring to incessantly manifest as protective bracers of dark energy around her forearms, grunted in frustration as they flickered and vanished. So if I'm having a bad day, is the whole place going to get gloomy and start raining? In a manner of speaking, yes, Naruto replied, a flicker of what might have been amusement in his mental tone. Emotional and spiritual discipline is key. You are not just residents here. You are its living heart. Alara was taking meticulous notes in a newly manifested silver-bound journal, her academic mind alight with the possibilities. This suggests the realm itself could be used as a defensive measure. Its very structure reconfigured by a sufficiently focused will. Precisely, Naruto affirmed. It was in that moment of calm, academic discourse that the peace shattered. Naruto fell silent, his head tilted, his void-like eyes gazing at three distinct points in the cosmos above them, points that only he could see. The resonant hum of the citadel grew a dissonant, agitated edge. They are coming, he stated, his voice losing its teaching cadence and becoming flat, absolute fact. The five women were on their feet in an instant, the atmosphere shifting from a classroom to a war room. Who is coming? Harribel demanded, her hand already resting on her sword. All of them, Naruto replied, and in their minds, he projected the images and the intent of the approaching forces. They saw a fleet of Shinigami, led by a captain whose spiritual pressure was a hornet's nest of furious, disciplined energy, cutting a path through the Dongai. They saw a unit of Quincy in stark white. Their movements precise and arrogant, traversing the shadow dimensions, their target clear, Alara. And they saw a barbaric horde of Arankar in hollows, a chaotic, ravenous tide, Bine. G led through a massive Garganta by a hulking, charismatic warlord. The old worlds have found our doors, Alara murmured, her face grim. They come to crush what they do not understand. They are not coordinated, Naruto observed. Three separate forces, each with its own agenda, striking at the same moment by a confluence of fear and ambition. A fortunate coincidence for them. A perfect test for us. He turned to face his court. His expression unreadable. I could erase them with a thought. But a sanctuary protected solely by its creator is not a sanctuary. It is a cage. A home must be defended by those who dwell within it. This world must have its guardians. Show me the strength of its pillars. The implication was clear. This was their fight. A surge of adrenaline, of terrible, thrilling purpose, shot through the 5 women. This was it. The first test of their new allegiance, their new home. Harribel stepped forward, her authority radiating from her. The Urankar are mine. They are a disease of our race. And I will be the cure. The Sternritter are Quincy, Alara said, her voice cold and steady. I know their tactics, their training, their arrogance. I will meet them. Neliel looked at Azane, a new, determined light in her eyes. The Shinigami, they are fast and disciplined. A direct assault will be needed. Azane nodded, her nervousness replaced by a surge of resolve. And a strategic defense. I can create barriers, coordinate our efforts, and provide support. We will face them together. All eyes fell on Tatsuki. The human world anchor point was the most vulnerable. My street, Tatsuki said. A low growl in her voice as she finally forced her full-bring bracers to stabilize around her arms. They want to come through my home. They'll have to get through me first. It is decided, then. Harribel declared, taking command. To your posts. Defend your fronts. For the Nexus. The 5 women vanished, moving with a speed and purpose that made the air crackle, leaving Naruto alone in the silent chamber. He closed his eyes, his consciousness expanding to watch over them all. The test had begun. Front eye. The Fang Gate, Hueco Mundo. The maw of the Garganta tore open with a visceral scream, vomiting forth a tide of savage hollows and disciplined Urankar. At their head was a warlord who called himself Xaver Grim, a towering Urankar with a jagged metal jaw, a resurrection that kept him permanently in a state of wolf-like savagery. His philosophy was simple. The strong consume, the weak perish, and this new, energy-rich realm was the ultimate prize. Feast, my children, Grim roared, his voice a gravelly avalanche. Devour this pathetic paradise and its weak king. His horde charged across the white sands toward the obsidian citadel. But they were met by a wall of water. Cheer Harribel stood before them, her Fracken at her sides. She raised her hollow-bladed sword, Tiburon, and the vast lake behind the citadel rose up at her command, forming a colossal, churning tsunami held in a state of perfect, suspended animation. This is not a paradise for you to consume, she declared, her voice carrying across the battlefield, cold and absolute as a winter sea. It is a sanctuary, and I am its queen. You will go no further. A queen of nothing. Grim spat, charging forward. I'll tear that crown from your head. Lagoda, Harribel intoned. She swung her blade, and a single, high-pressure blast of water shot from the tip, striking the ground before the charging warlord. It erupted into a geyser that sent dozens of his frontline soldiers flying. The battle began. Harribel was not a frantic fighter. She was a force of nature. She commanded the waters of the Nexus with disdainful ease, creating whirlpools in the sand to trap her enemies. Firing blade-like waves, Ola Azul, that cut through their ranks, and meeting Grim's savage ferocity with the implacable, overwhelming pressure of the deep ocean. It was a queen holding the line against a barbarian horde. Front 2. The Silver Veil, Schattenbereich. Sternritter, S. The Sentinel, a cold, calculating Quincy named Caspar Vogel, stepped through the shimmering veil that separated the shadow dimension from the Nexus. His elite unit of 10 fanned out behind him, their modern Quincy crosses already aimed, their eyes scanning the alien landscape. The heretic is here, Vogel stated, his voice flat. The Emperor wants her alive, if possible. The realm's master is to be captured. Eliminate all other resistance. For the Emperor. The unit advanced in a perfect, disciplined formation. But this was not a straightforward battlefield. Fall eins. Geisterlicht, Alara whispered from a high, unseen perch atop a crystalline spire a mile away. As the Sternritter crossed a seemingly empty patch of sand, the ground erupted in a dozen phantom images of Alara, each one glowing with a deceptive amount of reishi. The unit instinctively opened fire, their blue Heilig file arrows piercing the illusions. It was the opening Alara needed. While they were distracted, a single, silver arrow, almost invisible against the twilight sky, streaked from her bow. It struck the weakest member of the unit in the leg, not killing him, but injecting a parasitic reishi construct that flared brightly, crippling him and making him a beacon. Target identified. One of the Quincy shouted. A sniper, Vogel noted with cold fury. Spread out. Flush her out. It was a battle of tactics. Alara was not a brawler. She was a hunter. She used the Nexus itself as her weapon. At her whispered command, the crystal trees would shift, creating new lines of sight for her and blocking those of her enemies. She laid, Reishi Minen, traps in the sand that would erupt in binding light when stepped on. It was one true Quincy, adhering to the old ways of strategy and patience, against a squad of Yuacha's fanatical, arrogant soldiers. A battle of ghosts and hunters in a forest of crystal. Front 3. The Soul Door, Dongai. Captain Tetsuziman Iba, newly promoted to lead the 7th Division after the war, led the punitive force. He was a man of duty and honor, and the captain commander's orders were absolute. This new power was a threat, and it had to be pacified. 3rd, 4th, and 5th seats, establish a perimeter. He bellowed as his 200 Shinigami poured through the portal into the Nexus. Kido Corps, prepare defensive barriers. We face an unknown. His orders were cut short by a screaming green comet. Neliel, in her centaur-like resurrection, Gamuza, charged into their ranks like a force of nature. She was a blur of motion, her lance carving through the Shinigami formations before they could even react. She moved with a speed that defied belief, a whirlwind of righteous fury. You are not welcome here, she roared, her voice echoing with the power of her Sero. Hold the line, Iba shouted, drawing his own Zanpakuto. Engage the target, she is a single combatant. But behind Neliel, a wall of shimmering golden light, 100 meters high, erupted from the ground, blocking the advance of the rest of the Shinigami force. Azane Katetsu stood at the center of the barrier, her hands held in a complex Kido seal. Her face beaded with sweat. Bakudo number 81, Denku, she yelled, pouring her Raryoku into the defensive wall. Neliel-san, the flank is secure. Focus on the advance force. It was a partnership born of necessity. Neliel was the spear, the irresistible force, crashing against the Shinigami vanguard. Azane was the shield, the brilliant strategist, using her encyclopedic knowledge of Kido to control the battlefield, erecting barriers, binding groups of enemies with lower-level Bakudo, and shouting precise tactical instructions to Neliel. A former Espada and a Shinigami lieutenant, fighting side by side. Their synergy growing with every passing second. Front IV. The concrete shore Karakura. Tatsuki stood in the middle of her own street. The air shimmered, and a half-dozen grotesque creatures, amalgams of hollow and machine, crawled out of the distortion. They were scouts, probes sent by the Arankar faction, designed to be brutally effective against humans. Not on my block, you freaks, she snarled. The dark, obsidian-colored bracers of her fullbring solidified around her arms and shins, a perfect fusion of spiritual power and her own martial arts. The creatures charged, one spitting a corrosive acid. Tatsuki moved. She wasn't just a karate expert anymore. Her fullbring amplified her every motion, giving her the speed to dodge the acid and the power to counterattack with devastating force. She slammed her armored fist into the first creature's mask, shattering it. She spun, her leg connecting with another's head in a blow that sent it flying into a wall. This was her turf. She knew every inch of it. She used a parked car for cover, vaulted over a garden wall to gain a better angle, and used the solid, real-world objects around her to her advantage. Her power, born from her pride in protecting her home, felt stronger here than anywhere else. It was a scrappy, brutal, close-quarters brawl, a human girl with a soul of iron holding the line against the encroaching darkness. Defending not some abstract concept, but the very concrete beneath her feet. The defense was holding. The pillars of the Nexus were proving their strength. But the old worlds were relentless. On the Fang Gate, Xaver Grimm, enraged by the resistance, unleashed his full power. Crush, Lobo Aullador, he roared. His body swelled, becoming a 10-foot-tall monstrosity of black fur, bone spikes, and burning red eyes. He met Harribel's water with waves of pure, destructive sonic force, his howls shattering her constructs. She was forced back, her expression for the first time showing strain. In the Silver Veil, Caspar Vogel had had enough of the games. Heretic, you have sullied the name of the Quincy for the last time. Witness the power of our God King. He activated his Volstandig, wings of pure, Searing blue light erupted from his back, and his power magnified tenfold. I see you now. He raised his hand, and a storm of hundreds of holy arrows rained down on Alara's position, forcing her to abandon her perch and flee. At the soul door, Captain Iba, seeing his forces in disarray, grit his teeth. "Forgive me for this," he muttered, then raised his blade. Bankai. A colossal blade of pure fighting spirit erupted, and he brought it down on Azane's Denku barrier, cracking it from top to bottom. Neliel, seeing the danger, charged toward the Bankai, preparing to meet it head-on. And on the concrete shore, more creatures were pouring through the portal. Tatsuki, breathing heavily, her body bruised and bleeding, found herself surrounded. 10 of them now, their grotesque forms closing in. All 4 fronts, at the same moment, reached a breaking point. The pillars, for all their strength, were beginning to crack. Chapter 8 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.